Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Today I'm talking to Michael League. Michael is a composer, a producer, and a multi-instrumentalist. He's the founder and the leader of the band Snarky Puppy, as well as the international music ensemble Bokanté. He's an owner and the founder of the record label GroundUP Music and the artistic director of the GroundUP Music Festival. He's a record producer, he's an educator, but Snarky Puppy is the project that really launched him. And there are a couple of ways to tell the success story of Snarky Puppy. One of them is that a Grammy win in 2014 for Best R&B Performance catapulted the band into the limelight. The record that it won for was called Family Dinner Volume 1. It was recorded and filmed on stage in an empty theater in Roanoke, Virginia, and it showcased the band's extremely high level of musicianship, sophisticated arranging, deep funky pocket, and collective attitude. And it was filmed in an artful and elegant way that put the audience on stage with the band. It felt intimate, but it was very powerful. And subsequently, the band has gone on to collaborate with a massive collection of international artists and to help popularize a new wave of interest in both instrumental music and in the visual aspect of record making. And they've won 2 more Grammys in 2016 and 2017, both for Best Contemporary Instrumental Album. But there's another way to tell the same story. That 2014 Grammy win was just one in a long line of little victories for the band that started in a pizza place at the University of North Texas when a group of music students came together to play their first gig. As Michael tells it, the band spent over a decade in uncomfortable circumstances and near obscurity, playing often for audiences that were smaller than the band itself. Tour after tour, record after record, Snarky Puppy started a ball rolling and kept rolling it, gaining momentum, relocating from Texas to New York, and building towards what, from today's vantage point, looks like the inevitable global success that they've become, but what at the time probably looked a lot like magical thinking. Michael says he thinks of himself primarily as a student, and talking to him it's clear that he's constantly absorbing and synthesizing new information. He's thirsty for more, to know more, to do more. He seems to me to be unrelenting, nonstop, full on. For example, he tells me that he only really learned how to sleep last year, and it's changed his whole life. Recently, I went back and listened to the episode I did in 2018 with my wife, Amanda, when she interviewed me for the 100th episode. And she asked me who I would like to have on in the future. And I said 2 names, Donald Fagen of Steely Dan and Michael League. After today, I've had them both. In fact, after spending some time with Michael, I see what he does as related to what Steely Dan did. The way he works with session players, the visionary who operates in the context of a large group of talented musicians. Because although Michael League has a lot of projects, and a big part of what he seems to do is curatorial, everything in his musical universe somehow ends up with his thumbprint on it. I've come to think of his approach as somewhere between Steely Dan and Duke Ellington, because Ellington was famous for knowing how to write with his particular musicians in mind. And Michael is very aware of the people that he works with and how he can bring out the best in them while also achieving his vision. This conversation is a long time coming. I don't normally share this sort of thing, but I want to read a few of the messages that I sent over the years to Michael to give you an idea of how this one came together. I think it's helpful to illuminate a bit how these episodes happen, and in some cases, how invested I am in making them a reality. This little series of overtures that I made to him is also kind of a nice lens through which to see the evolution of the podcast. Hi, Michael. We've never met, but we do have quite a few mutual friends. I recently launched a podcast called The Third Story, featuring casual long-form conversations with musicians, artists, and people I admire. I record the interviews in my home studio in Park Slope. The first episodes feature Will Lee, Michael Lenhart, Daniel Levitin, Matt Pearson, and today, the latest episode is launching featuring singer Joe Laurie. I know you're on the road a lot this year, and I imagine you're quite busy when you're not, but if you have any interest or availability in the next couple of months, it would really be a pleasure to talk to you. All the best, Leo Sidran, March 14th, 2014. Hey, Michael, I thought I'd try again to hook up with you for a podcast interview sometime in the next few weeks. I know you're the busiest man in show business. I would be happy to meet you anywhere that's convenient for you. You might dig previous episodes with the likes of Charlie Hunter, Becca Stevens, Jacob Collier, John Batiste, Creed Taylor, Butch Vig, David Garibaldi. You get the idea. Best, Leo. September 20th, 2017. So I like that because you can see there's a little evolution now in the podcast. Look at all the people that I managed to talk to between the first time and the second time. He responds to that one. Hey, Leo, nice to hear from you. I have a polyp on my vocal cord and I'm reducing use of my voice, heading to Turkey for 2 months on vocal rest. So alas, a podcast is not the best thing for the moment unless you do all the talking. Maybe we can reconnect early next year when I'm back in action. Here I am 2 years later now, and I'm just giving you the best of. Hey, Michael, it's been 5 years since we initiated this thread, and I'm still hanging on. The Third Story podcast is still going strong, and I'd love to talk to you for it. It looks like there are 5 days off between your New York show and your Europe shows in June next week. I'm sure you're slammed during those 5 days, but if you have an hour to talk anywhere in New York anytime during those days, I will be there. Thank you for considering it. Best, Leo, June 20th, 2019. Okay, I hope that didn't wear you out. I'm honestly a bit exhausted just reading it, and it's not even close to all of the emails, Facebook messages, and texts that we exchanged over the years, not to mention the times that I bumped into him on the street and nudged him even more. And needless to say, it did not come together last June. It came together just now, in March 2020, nearly 6 years to the day from the first time I reached out to him. And despite the fact that he had been living 1 block away from me for the last 4 years, he now lives in Spain when he's not on the road. He does come through New York regularly enough, so he came to the Third Story headquarters to talk it down, and that's what you're about to hear. Third-story.com is the place to go. Sign up, subscribe, hang out, see some of my favorite Michael League-related videos, and dig on the Spotify playlist I curated for this episode. Also, you could check out some previous conversations with collaborators and friends of Michael's, including all of the episodes that I mentioned to Michael in an attempt to seduce him to do the interview, as well as the likes of Louis Cato, Chris Potter, and many others. Patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast is where you go to put all your extra money. No more foreplay. Here's the main event, me and Michael League. Michael League, I have correspondence with you that goes back to 2014 trying to set up a conversation. And
oh boy,
it is not lost on me that you were living a stone's throw away from here for a large part of that time, and you have essentially left the country. I mean, you've kind of been on the road anyway. But it really took you leaving the country in order to be able to carve out an hour
to go 1 block
to get together.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
I saw you play last night with Bokanté with one of your groups. It's a collection of people from all over the world. Not uncommon for you to do that kind of thing. At the end of the concert, I heard a woman come up to you and say, "Where are you from?" And your answer to her was, "I'm really not from anywhere."
I probably said that.
Why? What is it? What do you mean by that?
I'm a military brat. So, and for those of you who don't know, a brat is a kid who grows up in a military family. So that comes with a lot of things, many of which we probably don't have time to get into. But one of them is moving around all the time. So I was born in Long Beach, California, at Long Beach Naval Hospital. And then when I was 7, I moved to Montgomery, Alabama. And then when I was 11, I moved to Virginia. And then when I was 18, I went to college in Texas. And then when I was 24, 25, I moved to New York City. And a year ago, I moved to Spain. So I don't know. Where am I from?
And also, in that period of, let's say, 22 to last year, I don't know, you're in your sort of mid-30s now?
I'm 35, yeah.
You really have been on the road.
I lived in New York for 10 years legally. Probably I spent 2 years, 3 years
of that.
York. Probably 1,000 days in New York, of those 10 years.
Right.
But that's the nature of having a band in 2020, It's like to cut through all of the over kind of saturated places on the internet. You really have to go out and do the thing in person. I mean, you don't. That's actually not true. There's plenty of people that don't, but that's how we did it.
Yeah. Well, you sort of did it both ways, right? I mean, I think a lot of the success of the band has come as a result of being visually minded early on.
Sure.
And at the same time, relentlessly on the road.
I would say that each thing fed the other.
Yeah.
So it was the combination of, making interesting videos and taking a different approach to visual media via YouTube and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, coupled with, supporting that kind of visibility with traveling all over the place, in a van and playing for anybody who would listen, which would attract more listeners who go to your social media. Then you make more videos for them and blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for why the Snarky Puppy ship is still afloat, but I think two of the biggest ones are touring in unpleasant conditions and creating compelling, unique, kind of bespoke visual media.
Mm-hmm. What did your parents do? Your dad or mom are in the military?
My father was in the Air Force, and my mom was a flute teacher and childcare attendant, daycare attendant. But they both love music, so, there was a lot of music in the house, especially like classic rock and R&B and stuff.
You have siblings?
Yeah, one brother.
Is he a musician as well?
He's 5 years older than me, and he's an incredible musician and actually an ethnomusicologist.
Uh-huh. You started playing guitar?
That was the first instrument that I started and didn't quit, yes.
Did you stay in any place long enough to have a relationship with a teacher or have high school bands or anything like that?
Yeah, I was in the end of elementary school, all of junior high, and all of high school in Virginia.
Uh-huh.
So if someone's like, where are you from?
Yeah.
That would probably be the answer.
Right.
And I had a wonderful teacher there named Dan Leonard,
Mm-hmm.
a friend of my brother's, a private teacher who taught me guitar. And then later when I switched to bass, my senior year of high school, he kept me on as a student, but I was playing bass and he was playing guitar, which was really fun. And he's one of, I would say, two people that I really owe the biggest debt of gratitude to as teachers. The other was a mentor that I had after university, after college.
What were you listening to in high school?
I was like a blues rock kid. I loved Hendrix, Cream, Zeppelin, basically like explorative rock stuff, like outside of the box rock stuff, but also rock stuff that was rooted in the black tradition rather than the white tradition. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Of course, I love the Beatles and stuff like that, but I was really more into like Hendrix or the English guitar players who spent their whole time listening to Chicago blues guitar players.
And you felt like you were able to kind of identify that?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. The internet wasn't really a thing then, but it's not like people weren't able to get information. There were liner notes.
I talked to Bob Power last week, the engineer, who said his career was built on the back of liner notes.
Sure.
That it's much harder for especially the technical people and the side people, and if you're not in a band and you don't get credited, it's much harder to sort of find your way.
Now for them, I think it's really just word of mouth.
Yeah.
Because they're not even listed on Spotify or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I bought so many records from McKay's used books and CDs, as a kid, just buying a CD, listening to it, loving the tenor player, looking on the back, who's the tenor player? Joe Henderson. I've never heard of him. Let me check out some other records by Joe Henderson. And then, you look on the back of those, and that was my way of like getting into jazz. My brother has always been kind of the person who has fed me music and pushed my listening interests along, and he definitely got me into jazz. Yeah. And kind of more explorative pop. He gave me some records by XTC when I was a kid, and also got me into jazz. And like Steely Dan and Oscar Peterson were kind of my gateways into that, and I have my brother to thank for that. So end of high school, I was listening to quite a bit of jazz, and that's why I decided to go to jazz college.
And you joined the jazz band in high school, and that's how you ended up playing bass?
Yeah, I played guitar my sophomore year and my junior year in high school, and then my senior year, we didn't have a bass player. We had 3 guitar players, so of course they make one of the guitar players play bass.
How did that reorient your thinking about playing in an ensemble when you started playing bass?
Well, I loved it right away. I really dug it. But I wasn't planning on switching permanently. I was just planning on playing that year. I had already done all my auditions for college on guitar, and I got accepted by Indiana with a scholarship. So I was just going to play bass for that year and then go do guitar at IU. But then September 11th happened, and there were massive budget cuts around the country, and IU cut its jazz guitar program. So they said, you can still come and major in guitar, but it has to be classical guitar, and you have no scholarship. So
wow.
And they told me that in April. So all the schools I wanted to go to had closed their application pools.
Yeah.
So I was really kind of screwed. And the only formidable jazz university that was still accepting applications was the University of North Texas. And at that point, I hadn't played guitar in 6 months.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to audition on bass. And so I became a bass player.
What an incredible twist of fate that's what leads you to Texas and puts you in contact with this crew of people that would completely change what ends up happening.
It's not to say that couldn't have happened at another university, but it wouldn't have happened like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And also the influence that Texas exerted upon me after university is the thing that to me makes Snarky Puppy cool. If Snarky Puppy is cool, it's because of that. Maybe it's not cool, but if it is cool, it's because of Texas.
It makes it what it is. It's undeniably a thing.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is that being at Texas had one set of influences on you at North Texas, but the period after college had as much influence on your thinking and your band as the college experience.
Much more. You know, I enjoyed my time at the University of North Texas a lot. I spent 4 years there. I didn't graduate, but I spent 4 years there. And when I came there, I had just deficiencies.
Yeah.
In terms of like fundamentals of music playing, like nuts and bolts. I didn't know a lot of theory.
Yeah.
You know, my guitar teacher did his best with me, but I did not arrive advanced by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I'd been playing the bass for in some cases 10 years less than people my same age. You know? But I was lacking a lot of stuff coming from Northern Virginia. It's not like it was a hotbed of, you know, of music. So I arrived, and the main things that I gained from UNT were fundamentals, getting my shit together, for lack of a better term, and a peer community that was encouraging me to listen to things I had never thought about, and having conversations with people from, you know, that had perspectives that I had never considered, and this kind of thing that I think most people experience when they go to college anywhere.
Do you have any standout memories, any particular events that stand out along those lines?
Johnny Vodakovich coming to North Texas, and Johnny Vodakovich, if you don't know, is a kind of one of the patriarchs of New Orleans drumming. You know, he taught Brian Blade, he taught he taught every drummer that basically has ever been in New Orleans. And he came into the school to do this lecture with this attitude that I had never really seen before. A very unschooled, fluid, loose, kind of like humanity first, academia way later, attitude, feel, personality. You know, a great contrast to the regimen and the formality of education.
What were your expectations or your understanding about what music school, especially kind of jazz-oriented music school, was going to be like? And did it live up to your expectations? Was it problematic?
I mean, teaching an art form that is from the street in the halls of a university, I mean, that's all you need to say to understand what kind of experience it is. But I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
I think it's good, and I think it's bad. Like anything else.
It just has that intrinsic tension about it.
Yeah. I mean, grading someone on art is weird. The Grammys are weird in a certain kind of way, right? It's weird to say, here are these 5 artists, we're going to give one of them an award. Based on what? What's your grading? You know, what's the criteria for receiving that award? But, I mean, to me, that's counterintuitive, all of that. But the Grammys help artists who are under-recognized create sustainable careers. It happened to Snarky Puppy. No one knew us when we won our first Grammy, and it helped us a lot. And a lot of the reason why we can survive financially is because of that first Grammy.
Yes.
So would I call the Grammys jive? No, absolutely not. You know, it serves a very important purpose in a lot of ways, even though a lot of it is weird to me.
And a bit arbitrary.
It's just like anything else. The Recording Academy and the Grammys are just like anything else. It's a mixture of good and bad.
Yeah.
And also, it's very different from corner to corner, from room to room in the Academy.
Yes.
When you talk about the Grammys, you're talking about, you know, Song of the Year, which in my opinion hasn't been a good song since I've been alive, basically, you know? But then at the same time, you're talking about best engineered album, non-classical, and some incredible engineer is getting recognized for great work. You know, you're never going to have a perfect institution. It's never going to happen. So when people write off the Recording Academy, for me, I'm like, well, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't agree with you, because think about all the beautiful things they're doing for music advocacy in DC, help community enrichment, you know, and also all the artists that have had kind of on-ramps to the highway of sustainability opened up by winning those awards. You can't write off the institution because they're providing all those things. And it's the same with music college. There's so many good things that come out of music college, but the fact that not everything is good, it's okay.
What did you think you might do after music college? What led you away from music college, and what did you think you were going to do?
I mean, when I went in, I was going in to get my stuff together. I was going in to get my butt kicked, to be challenged, and I was practicing 10 hours a day and, playing upright for the first time.
Were you?
Really. And yeah. I mean, that school does not care about electric bass.
So you were there as an upright player?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't own an upright, but I was playing the school upright, the beat up, dog in the practice room that was shared, and then I bought my bass, a really bad bass my first year there just to have something to play. I wasn't there thinking I'm going to start a band. I wasn't there thinking I'm going to run a label. I wasn't,
It's interesting. You say Oscar Peterson and Steely Dan brought you into jazz. I mean, was there a part of you at that point that said, boy, I wonder what it would sound like to have a Oscar Peterson solo on a Steely Dan record?
Definitely. I've always been like that. I mean, we have a bit of an advantage. We have a lot of disadvantages as Americans, but I think one of the advantages that we have as Americans is that we don't look at ourselves as like parts of a tradition. I think in general as Americans, like we don't deal with the same crises that a folkloric musician from the north of Turkey goes through. You know what I mean? When they're coming up in such a strong, super deeply embedded musical tradition where it's like, you do this, you don't do this, right? Yes. And a lot of the time we as Americans see that as a disadvantage because we're like, God, I wish I was a part of something with roots. But actually we're kind of lighter on our feet. Sure. In that way, and that immediately when someone teaches us how to make a meal, we're like, but what if you put cinnamon in it? You know what I mean? And Jamie Haddad, who is a legendary percussionist who plays in one of my bands in Bokanté, when I was talking to him about technique, because I'm studying percussion and I'm always calling him with questions, and he told me, listen, man, the world does not need another great darbuka player. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, dude, you could spend your whole life as an American trying to sound like that guy on the street in Istanbul. Yeah. And you're never going to do it right. Yeah. You can try and you can fool some people, but it's never going to be done in the way that those people can do it. Yeah. Because it's a part of who they are. Like, it's a part of who we are as Americans to take things and mix them together, and really every musician on earth, regardless of where you come from, to find your fingerprint, to like undust your fingerprint and find what you have that is yours. I mean, technically every music, even the longest standing musical traditions, you look at them, in this kind of fixed way. Yes. That is Gnawa music. Right. That is,
Gwoka music.
Gamelan or Gwoka but it came from somewhere. Right. And at one moment in time, it was revolutionary. What we now think of as the tradition was a revolution. Right. And probably controversial. But the difference is that as Americans, we don't ever have the preconception of something being traditional. Right. So we like go past, we just immediately jump past that first step of the the explanative process and just say, okay, well, everything is new and everything is fresh. And I think that the primary difference between an American musician and a folkloric musician from another part of the world, it has nothing to do actually with their skill sets. It's just mindset. Yeah. Because I've met loads of musicians from other places, from folkloric traditions, who have that same mindset. They're like, I learned my tradition and I mastered my tradition, but I'm trying to do this with it. Right. But it's just that by and large, it's not a common mindset in that scene, whereas for us, it's common. But the thing that we lack sometimes is roots. Yes. Well, I saw you made an effort last night when you introduced the musicians on the stage with Bokanté, because you've got a percussion player from Ghana and you've got a singer from Guadeloupe, and then you made a point, for example, of saying, and representing the great steel tradition from South Florida, to allow the American experience to live in the same universe as a deep African tradition. It is the same. It's just younger. I mean, the steel tradition's 100 years old, but, roughly. But it's deep, and it's real. And it's, if you were an ethnomusicologist from Lebanon, if you're looking up North American folkloric music traditions, the sacred steel tradition, I believe, would be happily included on that list. Hearing that your brother is a musicologist, and that you have a familiarity and an awareness of ethnomusicology, it helps to fill in some of the blanks around how you've thought about integrating outside guests into first Snarky Puppy, and then when you started to create your other groups, that there is a kind of an impulse to try to bring in as much
folkloric tradition and have it interact with this band that's already fixed, or this music that already has a point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think music is one language, regardless of what corner of the world it comes from. It's a common language with common words, and you just have to figure out what words work together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I could very easily put together a band of people from different parts of the world that would not work.
You think you could do it?
Very easily.
Yeah.
Just by knowing what word this person could use that this one would not understand.
So,
you know?
Well, that's interesting, right? Because Bokanté, for example, is a band with essentially 4 guitar players and 3 percussion players. Variations on the guitar.
Yes.
Conceptually, it's a little out.
It's a strange...
But you knew that it was going to work, or you thought that it would work?
I knew it was going to work. I could hear it in my head, so I knew it was going to work.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just some kind of like... wasn't just some kind of experiment. It was like I was consciously thinking about, this person does this in this way. I want this sound, like what's missing in this sound, this thing, who can I get? And yeah, I mean, to me, really everybody in that band is kind of a drum, you know? I mean, it's very rare actually that the guitar players in that band are playing chords, you know? Mostly we're playing one note at a time, but different notes. So we're kind of creating the harmony one note at a time. But, you know, and also I pick what parts of the West African tradition we incorporate in that band. I pick what parts of the British blues invasion we use in that band. There's a lot of Led Zeppelin moments. There's a lot of Basekou Kouyate moments. You know, there's a lot of, you know, Kassav moments. But we try to pick the right moments that fit the people who are playing.
So I want to go back and talk about this, sort of the roots of Snarky Puppy, before we go down too many rabbit holes here. How did it come together?
I was at school and I had just finished my first year, I believe. I was writing music. I was always writing music. I mean, when I was in high school, I wrote music for my high school jazz band. That was some tune that was a weird mix of kind of jazz and other things. And, you know, I've never been like I don't even know what it's like to write like a jazz standard. I'm like, what is that? You know what I mean? Because if I was doing it, I would only be doing it as an exercise. I hear music through the filter of kind of like all the music I've listened to. Like it all runs together for me.
Yes.
So to create something authentic isn't really possible for me. I mean, authentically mine is possible, but authentic in a genre kind of way.
Well, that's kind of what I hear you saying over and over again, is that this idea that there is an authentic way to play any of these things, independent of whatever is authentic to you, it doesn't really concern you.
No. I don't know that I would go so far as to say it's complete bullshit to say that any one thing is authentic, but I would go pretty close to saying that. I think there's just things that are codified and things that are tested and true. And when I listen to a musician, for example, playing jazz music, and I don't hear the blues in it, it doesn't mean that it's not jazz. It just doesn't sound like the thing that I think of as jazz. But you go to Europe and you hear musicians playing jazz music that has nothing to do with the blues, and it's immensely beautiful. You know, especially when you check out like the Scandic ambient stuff or the ECM kind of thing. It's in certain instances, you really hear the blues. Like a John Abercrombie record on ECM, you really hear the blues, or a Keith Jarrett record. But there's other musicians, you know, that you hear, especially in Europe. I think it's the most prominent and visible example. These people are playing stuff that sounds like it never came near the Black American musical tradition, and yet it's its own thing. It's wonderful. And for someone to say that's not authentic, it's like, come on, man. They're making music the way that they feel, you know, oh, this isn't obeying the codified, you know, rules or, you know, aesthetics of the genre, and therefore I don't approve of it. I mean, there's music I like and music I don't like. And, you know, I feel that it's an intuitive thing. I feel it one way or the other, but my way of explaining it, you know, wouldn't have anything to do with that it's not following rules.
Right.
Or, you know, I think every musician has the ability to create great music based on where they're coming from and what they've listened to. We all play our record collections, right? So it's like, you know, and I think everybody has that ability and that opportunity. And sometimes the execution, you know, is the part where we get hung up. And great musicians who have created masterpieces also get hung up in the execution of other works. It's not like you get the golden ticket for your whole life. Like either you have it or you don't. You know, I think anyone is capable of creating something meaningful and interesting.
So when you were writing those compositions, those songs in high school, and you were kind of mashing it up and bringing in all of these different influences, if you heard some of that writing today, or if we heard it, will we identify certain elements of it that feel familiar?
Oh, 100%.
It was there.
you would absolutely hear the same personality, just a very underdeveloped version of that personality. And I probably wouldn't be able to sit through 10 seconds of it, but it would be obvious it was me.
What do you see as the sort of guiding principles or values of your style of writing?
I love rhythm, so I'm always playing around with rhythm in every part. I love texture, so I'm always thinking about, I mean, I guess whatever. I mean, are those things that other people don't think about? I feel like everybody thinks about those things, but I mean, I have my own relationship to rhythm and my own relationship to texture and my own preferences as far as like what I like to hear from those things, and you know, playfulness and in my own way. And you know, I think there's just certain things that you can identify when you hear someone. You're like, that's a thing that's indicative of that composer, you know, because it's really, hopefully we write what we like to hear, you know? So, I mean, what you would hear in my compositions would be the things that I like to hear, hopefully.
Yes. One of the things I think that you just identified that I recognize a lot is to find a groove, an idea, and hang out in that idea for a while.
I love that, yeah.
And let it develop without having to move too much from the principal impulse of the thing. And it's usually built on a rhythmic premise. You're not in a hurry to leave the scene.
Well, there's just so many things you can do.
Yes.
In any, you know, if you give a composer a 4-bar rhythm,
yes,
how many identities can you give to that 4 bars? I mean, a million. You can do it through texture.
Yes.
You can do it through counterpoint. You can do it through harmony. You can do it through space. You can do it through filling the space. I mean, you can. It's like, it's endless. I mean, for me, the problem is like, okay, when do I need to leave this idea? Because I see so many possibilities in any moment, and it's really knowing when to turn the corner and when to hang out. That's kind of like one of the bigger challenges. But it's endless, and that's coming from, you know, the sit in the thing is coming from Africa, and the variate on the thing is coming from Europe, which is, I guess, a very American approach, right? Because all our music is basically the combination of Africa and Europe. I mean, variations on a theme. It's been working for classical composers forever. You know, sit in the groove until the audience levitates. That's been happening in Africa since forever. You know? And everywhere that African music has gone, that has been the thing.
So we haven't even really gotten you out of high school yet in this story. You've written one song in high school, and you get to North Texas, and you're writing. You're always writing songs. You're always writing. Were you putting groups of people together to play your tunes?
Always. From the beginning. From the first week.
Did you play any gigs as a side person, as a sideman?
My God, yeah. That's all I did. I mean, when I got to school, I wasn't a good player, so no one was calling me for anything. But from the very beginning, I was putting groups together to play tunes. I was thinking, this trumpet player really sounds like Freddie Hubbard, and this tenor player really sounds like Joe Henderson. It would be cool to play these standards with them. You know, I'm an organizer.
Yes.
You know, probably the people that work with me would laugh at that statement because I'm not necessarily organized, but I'm an organizing personality. I like looking at things and saying those things would go together in this context. Let's put it together. I'm like a creator in that kind of way. I love creating, even if it's just people hanging out at my house. These 7 people, it would be really interesting to have them talking together over drinks, you know, or over this kind of food. You know, this person cooks this great. I know this person, you know. Really, I'm like I just love people, and I love studying people, and in an armchair kind of way, you know. So I was doing that from the very beginning and trying out tunes that I was writing with different groups of musicians to see what was working and what wasn't working. And then I guess eventually I had enough material to where I was like, I feel like I could maybe start to put a band together. And so I picked the people from the school that I thought would be most musically appropriate, and they came to my house, hung out once a week, and we ran through stuff, and then we played a gig in a pizza place.
And that was Snarky Puppy?
That was Snarky Puppy, yeah.
And why'd you call it Snarky Puppy?
Because my brother was going to use that name for another band when I was a kid. He chose not to, so I just remembered it, and I needed a band name for the band. So I just like used that name thinking, I'll change it later. And if I had known, you know, 16 years later, I'd still have that name. I would have come up with a better name, but you stick with your commitments.
But you know what's funny is I talked to Steven Bernstein, who has started many bands over the years. I talked to him last month, and he has a band called Sex Mob.
It's the best band name ever.
He said if he knew then that it would be going for 20 years, he would have named it Snarky Puppy.
And I would have named my band Sex Mob, so maybe he and I can do it.
It's not too late to exchange.
Exchange and confuse some audiences.
Yes.
But that whole time that I was at school, I was playing as a sideman. Steakhouses, bar mitzvahs, weddings, corner bar gigs, blues bands, straight ahead jazz, pop, covers, whatever. I mean, I was playing, you know, Snarky Puppy was always a passion project, but for every Snarky Puppy gig I did in college, I did 20, 30 working gigs.
How did doing those gigs influence or inform the way you thought about developing your band?
Man, I mean, I learned so much. I would say they taught me more about how to be a musician than they taught me how to run my band. Just about being versatile, being flexible, knowing how to play in different styles, knowing who played on what records so that you can give that to the music.
Yes.
Being selfless and not thinking of yourself as the artist.
Yes.
But thinking of yourself as the servant, which you have to do when you're playing a cover band gig, you know, or playing a steakhouse gig. Being considerate. You know, it taught me things about being really just about humility and about strengthening the muscles of versatility, I think, was the main thing. Versus, you know, there's a lot of people who come out of their bedrooms onto stages and onto tours because they have a video that's a hit or they get signed or something. And in a way, that's kind of like a purer form of artistry. But because it's like you've never been kind of corrupted by the working mentality of being a musician, you're just your artistic self. But at the same time, that presents a lot of problems when you're talking to your band. Maybe you don't know how to communicate to them, especially if they're working musicians who are career session people or whatever. You know, maybe you're less flexible and less versatile in what you can do. I think you just develop a lot of skills. I look at it like, whatever, I'm a military kid. So do you want a general who served in a war, or do you want a general who like just went straight from studying in their bedroom or something
to lead you into battle?
To lead you into battle. It's like you want someone who has dealt with every kind of experience on the battlefield. And I think of session musicians in that same way. It's like I feel a kinship with any musician in the world who's played 400 weddings.
Yes, absolutely.
You know?
Yes, of course. And it may, to some degree, explain what happened eventually, because, you know, if you have the idea, okay, I know that there's some people out there who have success with a YouTube video and that launches them, and we're not going to do that. We're going to put the work in. There's a part of you that's saying, you know, we want to really be, we want to work for it.
Well, if there was a choice.
Yes.
If someone would have asked me, would you like to spend 10 years on tour in a 15-passenger van, not making any money, or would you like to make one video and become famous? I would have definitely picked option B.
Would you? Because I get the sense that maybe you wouldn't. You seem relentless to me.
It's essential. I mean, I definitely have that. I have a high energy level.
Yes.
And I have a very, very high threshold of tolerance for abuse. So, you know, those two things work together in an interesting way. But Snarky Puppy's been around 16 years. 10 of those years were terrible, you know, in terms of conditions. They were a blast. I mean, I enjoyed... is this a doggy bed?
This is a doggy bed, and it's available for your feet as well.
Okay, thank you.
This is for the needy poodle. That's what you have Snarky Puppy, we have needy poodle.
Adult poodle.
Yeah.
Needy poodle.
Yeah.
That's a better band name also. Most things are. Yeah, those years were incredibly hard on me. They probably took years off my life. They definitely put years on my spinal column, you know. I would say 2004 to 2015.
Yeah.
It was like...
Until the Grammy.
And after.
Yeah.
I mean,
Really?
after the Grammy, we were still in a 15-passenger van.
Yeah.
Definitely, you know. I think our first tour bus tour was probably 2017 or 2016 or 2017, you know. I think. I don't know. I'd have to consult the experts on that, the people that booked the thing. But it was hard, you know, really hard. I mean, when you ask, would you pick option A or option B, that part of the journey, the part of driving 8 hours, playing a gig, you know, setting up, playing, packing up, getting right in the van, driving 8 more hours without sleeping.
Yes.
That is an essential part of who we are as a band, our identity. I would not trade that in the world for anything. If I had the option to make things a little easier on us in those years, I would have to be a devil to say no, because we suffered.
Yeah.
We also enjoyed, you know, it was an extreme contrast of ecstasy and suffering. And that's a part of who we are, and that's why the brothership between everybody is so deep. Brotherhood, brothership.
The brotherhood of the mothership.
Yes, exactly. Why it is so deep. And the only way we got through it was just the P word, you know. I mean, just, you know, whichever one, persistence,
Yeah, I was going to
perseverance.
say, which one is it?
Persistence and perseverance, the P words, I mean,
Did you feel it growing? Did you feel it building? I mean, there had to be some feedback that you were getting that this was worth continuing to do.
it's the little victories, you really must hang on to the little victories. You have 5 gigs where nobody comes, you make no money, you play the 6th gig, one musician that you respect shows up and says, you know what, y'all aren't there yet, but I hear something cooking. Keep going. And you hang on that through the next 5 crappy gigs until you get something else. One person who's like, you know what, I don't listen to instrumental music, but I'm going to go home and check some stuff out tonight because I really enjoyed that. You hang on to that, and you use it as the little carrot that you hang in front of your head, to keep marching forward. It's not easy, but I find it is very important to kind of try to make everything you can a pleasure.
Yes.
When you're stopping at a gas station in the middle of the night, make it fun.
Yeah.
When you're driving in the van, play games, talk bullshit, make loading fun, make everything fun.
Yes.
Because you can just look at it all as a drag, and if you do, you're not going to last.
It seems like this is being kind of informed by your vision and your desire, and yet you also have, been able to bring all these people along for the ride. You talk about it as brothership, as a community of people, and at the same time, it's being fueled by your own personal desire. How did you convince all these other people to do this with you?
Well, I don't think I sold, think I sold them any dream. I mean, I think from the beginning, it started out as this opportunity for a bunch of college musicians to play original music that was slightly different than the stuff we were normally playing. And we were, booking I was booking tours by myself, and we were traveling and everybody's having fun, going to New Orleans for the first time, going to, New York for the first time. And as each year went on, I think everybody felt that there was growth happening musically, if not business-wise, But then it started to happen. 30 tickets one year, 45 tickets the next year, 70 tickets the third year, 120 tickets the fourth year, and you start, although those years aren't accurate, that was more like years 6, 7, 8, 9.
Right.
But,
There's like 40 and 50 for a lot of years.
It was like 5 to 20 for the first 5 years.
I've heard that. I've heard
half the size of the band.
People coming to see you and the rooms are empty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. More often than not in the first 5 to 7 years. But when that started growing too, I think the band started going, hey, wait a minute.
I have to stop you for a second. I mean, I know you say it's the little things, it's the small victories that you carry with you. But at what point is it just crazy?
At every point. At every point, it's crazy because in this industry, something can happen and it can turn your entire career upside down in a week. I live in Spain now, in Catalonia, and I've been in touch with a flamenco singer from there for years that I was a fan of.
Who?
Her name's Rosalia. And and like a year ago, or 2 years ago, I invited her to go see a gig. My friend Becca Stevens, who lives in Brooklyn, her husband is named Nathan Schramm, and he has a really killer classical quartet called Ataca. And they were playing at the Palau de la Música, which is a beautiful venue in Barcelona. And I called Rosalie and I was like, do you want to go see this gig? We've been talking, we've never met.
By the way, I don't even know how the story ends, and I have full body chills waiting to hear how the end of the story
It's not
goes.
exciting. It's not an exciting story. But I called her and said, do you want to go to the show? We've never met. You want to have dinner and go to this gig, And she was like, yeah, totally. So she and her friend came to this show. We went and had dinner. We had this really interesting conversation about Beyonce and artistry, and like, what's an artist, what's an entertainer. And we disagreed on some things. And actually, by the end of the conversation, I had changed my mind about a lot of ideas that I had. She's a very, very intelligent, articulate, sweet, kind person, I changed my mind about certain things, and I thanked her for that. I was like, yeah, I really, appreciate that perspective. And then we went and saw this classical concert. It was super cool.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious because, after the show, one person came up to her and was like, Rosalie, and she's like, yeah. He's like, we went to college together. She's like, oh, right, Steve, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I actually invited her to sing with her because we were playing in Barcelona in like a month. She's like, yeah, it'd be great. Because actually that's how I met her, was she sent me a message years before saying she liked the band. She went to a music college called ESMU in Barcelona. And, after when we were saying bye that night, I was like, hey, if you want to get together later this week, I'm around for a few more days. And she's like, I'm launching this music video on Thursday, and I think it's going to be kind of a busy week. And I was kind of like, what are you talking about? I launch music videos all the time, and it's like nothing. You just do some posts. And the video that she launched on Thursday was a song called Malamente, which was like her first it was a massive hit, And she knew in that moment, she didn't tell me, I think she's a very humble person. She knew she had her team together. They put the money down. They knew this was going to be a thing that was just going to smash Latin music, And so she was preparing for this thing. And from that moment on, she's this untouchable pop star. And the reason why I tell this very long story is because at any moment as a musician, your career can it can go like that. It can do this gigantic spike.
Yes.
Wednesday, no one knew about her.
Yes.
No one knew about her. She had, I don't know what, 30,000 Instagram followers or something, And on Friday, she had 10 times that. And on Saturday, she had 10 times that.
Yep.
And that can happen. You can, sometimes it's from a Grammy. Sometimes it's from an album that comes out. Sometimes it's from John Mayer sharing your video or whatever. And things can happen in the opposite direction too. Your whole career can crash in one moment.
When I look at, we're using Rosalia as an example, but we could use Snarky Puppy and GroundUP as well. When success, at least from the outside, arrives, it can feel from the consumer point of view like there was sort of this inevitable plan that was in place for what happens when the success shows up. I'm hearing you say, look, there wasn't a moment in which we suddenly were making it.
No. It was a million little moments.
Was there an idea like, I see a thing that I think I want to head towards? I think I would like to be a label. I think I would like to start a music festival. I think I would like to be a curator. I think I would like to be somebody who introduces all kinds of music to my audience and my fans.
Yeah, I know. It's not like it's mindless. You definitely, I look for opportunities for sure, or I shouldn't say I look for opportunities. I should say that if I see an opportunity, I'm not scared to try it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like tomorrow I'm going to wake up and say, what new business venture can I start? It doesn't happen that way because I'm just trying to take care of my current responsibilities without screwing those up, which is enough of a challenge.
Well, and you have a lot. You have a lot of people that are around you.
Sure. But even if I had one responsibility, it would take most of my energy to not screw it up. You know, the idea of having a music festival or having a record label or whatever, a lot of it comes from like, okay, well, we have this fan base and we have all these artist friends, and wouldn't it be cool to put them all together? Let's start a festival, or we have this fan base that's interested in new different kinds of music, and we have all these artists who aren't getting enough recognition. Maybe we can just start a community that puts them in front of those fans. GroundUP Music, our record label. So the ideas generally arrive organically, and I think that we're not afraid to take risks as an organization to try to make those things a reality. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they fail for many years and then they become a success, and people forget that they were a failure. But I don't think you can ever really stamp failure on something until it's over.
Yeah.
Is our label a failure? Not yet. We've never made money, but it's not dead yet, right? So is our festival a failure? It's never made money. I would call our festival absolutely, a success in many ways.
It is incredible to hear you say that both the label and the festival are not profitable.
They've never made $1.
Because from the outside, they seem extremely successful.
Yeah, just like if you bump into a musician that you recognize on the street, you expect them to be living in a mansion, but you talk to them and it's, they're renting the basement of somebody's home with no windows in it and no Wi-Fi and no phone service.
Are you speaking from experience?
I'm talking about a friend. Yeah.
You said this thing earlier about how people might say to you when the band was kind of coming up, I don't really dig instrumental music, but this reframed it for me. In fact, the breakthrough project, the thing that cut through the noise and brought you to a much larger audience, was the project that brought singers into the mix.
It's a dark reality, but I don't mean that in a bad way towards the singers, because they're my friends and they're incredibly talented. What I mean is that it's kind of dark that a band can spend 10 years working as an instrumental group, and then the first time it collaborates with singers that it gets attention. But that's not a bad thing. It just tells you that generally people like to hear singing. But a lot of those people who heard us for the first time with singers then continued to listen to us without singers.
Tell me about when you decided to bring singers in.
Snarky Puppy is an instrumental band, but the musicians are session musicians. and they've played 1 million weddings and 1 million steakhouse gigs, and they've done 1 million recording sessions, and they know how to play with singers.
Yeah.
So at one point in New York, Rockwood Music Hall approached me and said, hey, we'd really love to do a residency with you. And I was like, yeah, but I don't really want to do a residency with Snarky Puppy playing instrumental because that's going to cannibalize other shows that we might play in the city. So why don't we do a special thing where we we have 3 singers a night and we back them up. And they were like, great idea. So I called it Family Dinner. Just because it was kind of a joke because we were going on stage at like 1 a.m. every night on Fridays. But it was people within our community, so it felt kind of like a family. You know, it's artists that we had worked with a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And we'd invite 3 people a week, sometimes instrumentalists as well, not just singers. Invite 3 artists a week, have them send 2 songs each, no rehearsal, everybody learn the music at home, go on stage, count it off, and play it. And it was such a blast, and the audience was so into it. The band was so into it. That rush of going on stage not knowing what's going to happen and like trying to make some music out of the situation in a very cool venue. And then after maybe a year of doing that, I was like, we should do a record like this. You know, it would just be so cool. It was natural for us. It wasn't a marketing ploy.
Yeah.
It was just like, this is what we do all the time anyway.
Yeah.
But let's do it in a creative context. Let's not do it in a wedding context or a steakhouse context or a TV show context. Let's do it on our terms.
Yes.
We take the artist songs and we mess with them. We do the arrangements.
Right. Well, that was the innovation. That was the thing that brought it into your universe. When you were making the first Family Dinner record, did it feel different? Did you have a feeling like this may be a thing that is going to connect on a different level?
Not from an artist to audience perspective, only from an artist to artist perspective.
Yes.
Like for us,
Yes.
when we were making those recordings,
Yeah.
we felt it was special.
Yeah.
But I had that feeling at Silva.
Yeah.
I had that feeling for sure at Family Dinner 2.
Yeah.
Probably stronger than at Family Dinner 1, just because it was a bigger group of musicians and more diverse.
Yes.
You know, artists from all over the world,
Yes.
whereas pretty much everybody on Family Dinner 1 was American.
Yes.
3/4 of them. It felt special.
Yes.
Family Dinner 1. We were like, something's going on here. This is cool. But that doesn't always mean that it's going to translate to commercial success. And actually, it didn't until the Grammy nomination.
Right.
Like, that record was not selling great.
And that particular performance that was nominated and eventually won.
Yeah, it was something with Layla Hathaway.
With Layla Hathaway. There is a moment that you probably know what I'm talking about.
Moment, yes.
In which she is able to do this throat singing and she breaks into this insane interval, sings 2 notes. And when she sings this interval, the entire band falls out.
Well, she sings 2 notes at the same time.
She sings them at the same time.
Yeah, and she's improvising with the keyboardist, Corey Henry, who was playing organ.
Right.
I mean, she was following him.
Yeah.
It was very deep.
It was extremely deep, and you were moved. The band was moved. You are visually shocked that this thing has
it was
happened.
a special moment.
That enthusiasm, I think, is a big part of what translated through the music. For people who might not understand, pay attention. There's a thing happening here.
And probably, had there not been video of that performance, it never would have been nominated for a Grammy.
This is the interesting thing about that whole performance and the phenomenon of the band around that. I don't think any band ever wants to think that, or anybody who makes music wants to think that you need to see it in order to appreciate it musically. And yet, it does change the experience.
Yeah, it's why we started making video records in the first place, you know, because people were saying that same thing to me. Like, I don't get it when I hear it, but I get it when I see it. So, you know, okay, let's put it in a package that you understand, you know, that people understand. I mean, I feel the same way sometimes when I see bands.
Yeah.
I love them, but I love them more when I see them.
Yes.
But that thing has worked for us, and because it's worked for us, we've chosen to not do it at certain moments. You know, our last 2 records are studio records because we didn't want to just be the band that does the thing that works and that everybody expects. And we wanted to grow and stretch, so we did some records that were really traditional studio records that afforded us some other possibilities that you don't have when you make a record live.
Would you think about that after the live in the studio thing became part of your identity for a while? Would you have to start thinking about, well, how am I going to arrange this in a way that we can execute the whole thing in one take?
Of course. Yeah, but generally, if you've got 3 guitars and 5 keyboardists, you can pull off anything that you would multi-track. You can pull that off live.
Yes.
And our next record that we're going to make is going to be the live video thing as well, but within a different context. And so, you know, I think it's very important as artists that everyone just keeps trying new things and moving forward. And once you say, this works for me, I'm going to sit in this for a long time.
Yeah.
The art's kind of dead.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to add something to it. You have to,
even when it's your own art, you have to keep moving.
Especially when it's your own art.
So how do you see what you do today? I mean, how do you think about what you do?
I mean, I think of it as kind of a combination of all the things that we really enjoy about music. You know, we take things from different musical traditions that we love and we put it together.
I don't mean specifically Snarky Puppy, though. I mean, you personally are not only Snarky Puppy. I think for a long time it was, Michael League, he's the Snarky Puppy guy. But now it's like there's a handful of bands. There's all of these other projects. How do you wake up in the morning and think about what you do?
I'm glad you think of it that way. I never wanted to be Mr. Snarky Puppy, but because I've always seen it just as one side of what I like about music.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, the side that I've given the most amount of time to, and that band is such a family, and I love everyone in it, and I love what it is. But it is just one thing, you know. I have that band, I have Bokanté, I have the festival, I have the label, I produce. Really, what I spend most of my time doing now is production for other artists, and mostly artists from different parts of the world. You know, the last few projects I worked on were like, you know, I'm working on a record with a Carnatic artist from India. I just finished one with an artist from a fado singer from Portugal. I just finished one with an Afro-Peruvian singer from Peru. You know, stuff from different parts of the world.
Yep.
I love that. But I mean, if you said, well, how do I think of myself? I just think of myself as a student, really.
Mm-hmm.
I just love learning about music and studying it. And, you know, when we take elements from different genres and put them in the music of Snarky Puppy or Bokanté or in my solo album stuff that I'm working on or what I'm producing, it's not light. It's not put in there lightly. You know what I mean? I listen to that stuff and I get in there and I study it the best I can with the amount of time that I have. And I always try to make sure that when it's incorporated in such a way that it's run through the way that I relate to it. That I'm never really, when I'm practicing crackab, you know, I'm playing along with Gnawa records, trying to swing and sound exactly like a Gnawa musician.
Despite the fact that Jamie Haddad said you'll never get there.
Exactly. Because that's part of the process, right? When I'm practicing, I'm trying to be that thing. But then when I put it on my record or when I write it in one of my things, I'm running it through me and trying to play it in my way, the way that I want to do it. Because it's the only way that I'll be able to do it that is that wonderful A word, authentic, you know?
Well, I think that that's true. And what I think is really incredible, and I'm not sure, that's why I asked you, how do you see some of the values of what you do? Because you're at a point now where if we were only talking about Snarky Puppy, we could talk about it in the context of that project. But whether or not you're bringing in Latin elements or you're bringing in African elements, or which are all really kind of like different sides of the same beautiful vibrating clave that's running around the world. Nonetheless, they're specific, they're different, and they all kind of feel like you in a way. That's an interesting thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you said, how do I think about myself and what I do? I mean, I think of myself as a student who combines and connects things that I relate to deeply, you know? Which is really, if you break that down, it's what any folkloric musician does too. If you grow up in Ghana as a djembe fola, or you grow up in Mali, you know, as a jelly, you know, ngoni player, you are looking at your musical tradition and you're saying, I love this about Basse Kukuyate and I'm going to take that and put that into my playing. I don't like this about Basse Kukuyate, so I'm not going to put that into my playing. So really you're doing the same thing, just in a more fixed environment. We're all doing the same thing. We're taking the things that we like from the artists that we love and we're trying to emulate them in a way that is ours. And we're leaving the other things out. And that's what every musician goes down the same path, whether you're a Jelly Ngoni player or a part of a gamelan orchestra or an American with no kind of fixed musical identity or whatever, that you're like, I don't know what to, you know. I mean, it's all the same. We just play the things that we've heard and like, you know, the way that we want to do it. And that's who we are. So when you say, what am I doing? I guess I'm just doing what everybody else does. I just have a different fingerprint than you. Or than Baseku, or than Erkanour, or whatever. So my fingerprint looks different. It sounds different when I play, but it's the same journey.
I'm reminded of Duke Ellington to an extent as well, in the sense of the way writing and the people that he wrote for started to inform one another.
Ellington is a huge inspiration for me in terms of his desire to craft music specifically for the individuals in the band. Knowing, okay, Snooky's good at this, whoever's good at this, so, you know, I'm going to write that for them. Because it's not about who's playing that chair. It's about you and
that person
and your personality.
Well, I watched you last night with Bokanté, and there were moments when you were just able to step back and maybe play a little rhythm, or maybe not even have to, and just let this thing that you had sort of launched it spinning and just dig it, just appreciate what was happening and hear your fellow musicians in that band, and that was what you were doing for a minute, was just kind of being there.
Yeah, well, I think most of the time when I'm on stage, the best thing I can do is not play. That's the best thing I can do for the music. And also I think that shines light on probably what I think of as the most important element of anything that I have going on is just great people around me.
Yeah.
I would love to think I'm a good composer or a good bass player or whatever, but I can say for certain that I'm very good at choosing great people to be around.
Yeah.
I would say if I have one skill, that would be the one of like knowing this is a nice, beautiful person who is also a great musician, and that is really the most important thing. I mean, if you're in a situation in which you can't spin the ball and let it go and step back and watch it be cool, then there's a problem, I think, with your staffing or your community or however you want to look at it, whether they're above you or below you or alongside you. You have to have people around you whose job it is to just do what they would naturally do, and that has to be the thing that makes the machine run. If you need to be there telling them, do this, do this, do this, for the machine to run, then they're not the right person for that machine.
But what about creatively? I mean, how much explaining are you doing? Because it is so specific, so much of your writing. How much explaining are you doing? When you put together these assemblies of musicians that make perfect sense to you, you can hear it, 3 percussion players, 4 guitar players, and the singer, you hear it. But I imagine that for at least some of the people in these kinds of, in a project like that or in Banda Magda or whatever, that you're having to say, listen, this is going to be a little bit different.
I mean, I'm very communicative.
Yes.
And it depends on the situation and the musician I'm talking to and the rapport and how long we've been playing together. And, you know, I find in Snarky Puppy, I don't have to explain things much because we've been together for a decade and a half.
Yeah.
So I can send a demo to the guys. They'll learn it. They'll come in playing it at 86%, and I'll just push the ball along the remaining 14% by saying, think about this like this. And then immediately, boom, it's there. And if it's not there, okay, think about it like that, but try this, you know? And we get there quickly with Bokanté. Maybe there's a little more explanation. But if you have great musicians around you, people aren't dumb. They know when it's working.
Yes.
So even if I have a concept in mind and we start playing it and they're not playing according to my concept, if what they're playing is cooler than my concept, we roll with it.
Yeah.
It's not about pride. It's not about ego. It's not about my vision. It's about making music that feels good and that makes me feel good. Yeah. And sometimes what other people play that is different than what I intended makes me feel better than what I intended. Sure. So let's roll with it. Thank you. And move on. You know, it's great. It's such a happy kind of accident when that goes down, but it happens a lot. And I find that the better musicians you're surrounded by, the more that happens, the less you need to say. But in the beginning, you have to be clear about what the concept is. Yeah. Because if you get a group of people together and you just say, play what you feel, you really run the risk of everybody just playing the way that they always play. And I believe that every project, every band, every record, every movie, every work of art has its own set of rules, its own ecosystem. You know, it's a unified work, and people need to be in tune and in touch with what that is.
Do you find that you're able to work on multiple projects at the same time and juggle all of those intrinsic universes that you're creating?
It's very hard. I find it takes me a lot of time to get in that universe. Tonight I have to go home and write a theme song for a Japanese shochu company to be recorded starting at 11 in the morning with Lewis playing drums. Lewis Cato. Great. And I anticipate, you know, it's 7:25 now. I'll probably start writing around 8:30, and I'll probably start writing something good at about midnight, and then I'll start really developing the idea at 2 a.m., and then hopefully by 5 it'll be done.
See, when you came in and sat down, I thought to myself, he's got something planned for after this, and it's going to be like, this is not the end of your day. This is like...
It is not. But I mean, you know, the problem with me is that, and I think a lot of artists hopefully can relate to this, it's that it just takes me a long time to get in a groove. And every time I get a text message while I'm trying to write, it sets me back 20 minutes. Every time.
But why don't you turn the phone off?
I do. Well, I mean, I live in an apartment that doesn't have phone service.
That's good. That's helpful.
By the way, you don't have a shamisen in the house, do you?
I don't. I have a sample.
It's really a problem for me. It takes me a long time to get in a groove. But then once I get in the groove, then I work very fast.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. It takes a while to get into it, but then you get in it and you're ready.
And ideas are exploding out of my head, and I'm struggling to catch up with them, you know.
Are you a nighttime writer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can write at any time of day, but I find nighttime is the right time, you know. It's the creative time. Lewis Cole has a great song called Weird Part of the Night that I really relate to a lot.
But are you a daytime person too? Do you wake up?
Yeah, I'm cool.
Do you sleep?
I love sleeping, yeah. I just started last year, actually.
I had a conversation with Nick Hard, who's been your engineer, mixer, accomplice.
For years.
I had a conversation with him in November, and we were talking about this period when you started recording multi-tracks, recordings of the concerts on the road. So you would, do a multi-track recording of the concerts, then get on the bus. The band essentially goes to sleep. He spends all night mixing these recordings so that when you get to the next venue and get to Wi-Fi again, he's able to post them. Okay, that's already very impressive. Here's the piece of it that slayed me. You wake up after a few hours of sleeping on the bus to check the mixes and then do mix revisions on last night's concert.
Yeah.
That level of engagement to me is, there's a number of hyperbolic words I could use, but let's just say extreme.
We could just say it's stupid.
It's a thing. It's a heavy thing. And when he told me that, I said, does he not hang? Does he not sleep? Does he not drink? What does he not do in order to be able to make all of that work? And he said, no, he hangs. He'll drink a little bit. He sleeps a little bit.
All things in moderation.
Right.
Sleep, however, I don't believe is a thing that should be done in moderation. I believe it should be done the way it needs to be done, which is 8 hours a night.
And were you not doing that?
I haven't done that till last year. It's the first year of my life that I started sleeping 8 hours. And I'm a very different person. I behave differently. My emotions are different. My health is different. My way that I look at life is different.
Did anybody have to say to you should try sleeping?
Yeah, a very good friend of mine sent me a book called Why We Sleep. It was written by a sleep scientist named Matthew Whitaker, and basically just the science of sleep and what it does for you and what not sleeping does to you. And it was a very, was ringing a lot of bells when I was reading it. And I was like, oh my God, and it's dangerous. It's not healthy. It's a bad thing, and especially as Americans, I think we wear it as a badge of honor when we don't sleep. Oh man, I'm so busy. I got so much going on. Man, I'm like sleeping like 1 hour a night, but it's like you do it like you're proud of it, like bragging about having too many things going on and not sleeping. And it's unhealthy. It's like, to me now, after reading that book, it's like bragging about doing heroin. It's like, why would you brag about that?
Right.
You're hurting your body and most people around you in a lot of ways, and you're contributing to an early death.
Yes.
Like, don't do that. It's awful,
Did you think somehow it meant you were more productive because you weren't sleeping?
I would say that the majority of my rationale for not sleeping was about guilt. Was that if I knew that I needed to be doing something and someone was expecting something of me, how dare I rest? And that's awful. That's what it's so, when you say it in English or in any language, when you say it out loud, you realize how fucking ridiculous it is. But it's ridiculous.
I imagine that you have put so much in motion, and so much of it is riding on you, your ability to deliver this stuff, that it would be hard not to feel a certain amount of pressure to deliver on it. You have a lot of shit that you have to do.
Yeah, of course. I feel a lot of pressure every day. Today I had a meeting with someone who works in one of my things, and it's like, I have this problem with this person, this isn't going well. It's never perfect.
Yeah.
And all you can do is wake up every morning and try to do everything better and try to make everybody's lives a little better and a little easier. And of course, when you're the owner of the company, there's more pressure on you and there's more responsibility. But at this point, what? Well, the alternative is closing shop.
I mean, I could see why the safest place for you to be is on stage.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. It's so easy.
Yeah.
Anytime in which I'm in a position where all I have to do is fulfill one task.
Yes.
Like going in to play a recording session on bass. I'm like the happiest camper on earth, It's like, just tell me what to play. Tell me what octave to play it in. Tell me where you want the tone knob. Tell me everything. I am so happy to not be in charge of anything, to just play.
Well, I think for a lot of people, being on the road is like that. I mean, I think for many people, you get to a place where it's like, I just have to make it to the gig and then play the gig.
There are many situations in which I've been on tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, in which all I have to do is just show up and play the gig.
Yeah.
And it's the best.
Yeah.
I have a beer before the gig.
Yeah.
I have a beer after the gig. Yeah. I'm like hanging out with friends who live in those cities for lunch.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's like, just focus on the thing, knock it out. It's great. I'm never happier than when I'm in that situation. But I also recognize that having the festival, having the record label, leading the bands that I lead, these things have a positive impact on people's lives. And they create community in a way that people appreciate
Yeah.
And selfishly, I would really love to just not have them at certain moments. In certain moments, I would love to just close everything up and just deliver mail. You know what I mean? Or just play bass on someone's record and have somebody tell me what to do. But I also know I can get outside of myself enough to know that I know people who do that. I know people who deliver mail. I know people who just play bass on other people's records, and they want to do
what you
things
do.
that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I want to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
Which just tells you it's always greener on the other side. And all we can do is the best we can with the tasks that we are charged with.
Yes. It strikes me that moving to a small village in Catalonia would start to look more and more attractive at a certain point, given all of that.
Well, I mean, you've been in this apartment 11 years. A decade in New York will definitely make you want to move to a small village. I love New York. It's still my favorite city in the world. Well, my second favorite city in the world. But, you know, it's...
Wait, what's your first?
Istanbul, for sure. It's hard to live here.
Yeah.
It's hard to do laundry. It's hard to go grocery shopping. It's hard to go to the DMV.
Tell me about... I did not know that that was a thing for you, that Spanish and then Spain had become so important to you.
6 years ago, I had to write this record called Silva for Snarky Puppy, and the woman who connected me with the Metropole Orchestra, her name is Friederike Darius. She used to play in the orchestra and also was a manager. Now she's back as a manager there, and she also managed the WDR big band for a while. She told me, I have this summer home in this little village in Catalonia, and you should write the record there because no one's going to bother you. So I said, okay, cool. You know, she gave me the keys and she never asked for them back. So I went and I wrote the record there. I mean, I didn't speak Spanish. I didn't speak Catalan for sure. And fell in love with this village. I fell in love with the people. And so I started going every year, twice, 3 times a year. Yeah. And then after about 5 years, this house went up for sale for like, you know, the price of a small car.
Right.
You know, and I was like, wait, you can buy a home for that much money in a, you know, 2,000-year-old village. And I'd been in New York for 10 years at that point. And I was like, you know what? I'm always going to be in New York. It's always going to take me here. I'm here now. Yeah. I don't really live here anymore, but I'm here now, you know? So I was like, I'm just going to buy this house. Yeah. And I did. And now Spain has become a very important place to me. My girlfriend lives in the south, in Cadiz. In Andalusia. We're really very, very close to Morocco, you know.
Is she from Cadiz?
She is, yeah. She's from San Fernando, which is right next door, where Camarón is from, where the famous flamenco singer.
Yeah. Do you know Antonio Lizana?
He's a good friend of mine.
Isn't he
went to high school with my girlfriend. He's a good friend of mine, yeah. And I love, you know, I mean, I study music in Morocco. Yeah. I have a teacher in Cadiz who teaches me cajon, you know, and so it's like it's a special place for me, man. I love Spain because it really has this, and I say Spain and not Catalonia because even though I live in Catalonia and my friends there, I'm in a very, very rural Catalan village, and I'm totally in love with the culture there. But I spend a lot of time outside of Catalonia, and I really love everywhere that I've been. I love Galicia. I love the Basque Country. I love Cantabria. I love Asturias. I love Andalusia. Like, I just love it. I love everything about it. And I mean, not everything. There's things I don't love, like any place. But I think that it has this really incredible combination of appreciation for how to live a fruitful, enjoyable life that we miss a lot in the United States, but it also has a very solid infrastructure that sometimes you miss if you go to a lot of Latin American countries. So for me, it's kind of that perfect balance between like, I feel safe. If I, you know, get cancer, I have confidence in the medical system here, but at the same time, people really understand how to enjoy themselves. And that's important for me as a workaholic, as a person who is slopped for 15 years trying to make something happen, and as a person who's lived in New York for a decade, you know, I talk to a lot of New York musician friends, and when we talk about they're just like, are there any other places for sale?
Well, how and do you feel isolated? I mean, do you feel estranged from the scene or from people?
I feel like the place where I felt loneliest in the world was New York. You know, I had a couple nights in New York before I was really living here that I just felt, you feel extra lonely when you're around 8 million other people.
You
know
really
what I mean?
I totally do.
Because I think when you're alone with no one around and you feel lonely, you can say, I feel lonely because I'm alone. But when you're around 8 million people and you feel lonely, you're like, I'm lonely because I'm lonely, because there's no one around that I connect with, and that makes me feel like I should be here. And I think a lot of New Yorkers or people who live in large cities could relate to that. Or people who live in a household with people that they don't love or that don't love them, or that, you know, that's when you feel most alone. So I love it. And I'm never there for more than a month.
Yeah.
So if I start to get cabin fever in this place,
Yeah.
I'm an hour drive from Barcelona. I'm 45 minutes to the airport.
Yeah.
You know, I'm constantly going in and out. So for me, it's perfect. It's 2 hours from Istanbul where I study. It's an hour and a half from Morocco where I study. It's great, man. It's for me at this point in my life, it's perfect. You know.
This is the last thing I wanted to say. I realize now, this is the thing that escaped me that I wanted to mention to you. When you said this thing about how you realize that what you do has value to other people. There is a phenomenon that happens sometimes around certain kinds of projects and bands and universes in which the audience takes on such a deep participatory role in the experience that it almost doesn't belong to you
Absolutely.
in the way that it did when it started.
I think that's the case for a lot of things. Like when you start a ball rolling, sometimes it takes more energy to stop it rolling than it does to keep it rolling,
Yes.
you know? And that comes with a lot of years of work and that kind of stuff, or a very cool idea. I mean, maybe somebody opens a restaurant, you know, tomorrow in New York, and on Friday it's the new thing and everybody's trying to copy it, you know?
Yes.
But I think that is just evidence that the things that we do as artists or as anyone, non-artists, they're not really ours. They don't really belong to us. And that's what Johnny Vodakovich said in that masterclass that he gave at my university that we were talking about an hour and a half ago. He's like, music doesn't belong to you. Why do we get upset when we have a crappy gig? And why do we feel like we're, you know, kings of the earth when we have a great gig? You didn't invent any of that stuff. You didn't add a note on the piano. You didn't invent a rhythm. Anything that you've played, people have played before. That's not the point of music. It's not about ownership. You know, music is floating around in the air and you just choose what you want to pull down and use. And that mentality has gotten me through a lot of difficult situations. It's got me through a lot of bad gigs, a lot of personal problems with people over music. And just remembering it's not yours, and it's just a thing that's out there, and it's a thing to be celebrated, and it's really, we're just tapping into something. When you cook a great meal, when you write a great symphony, when you construct a great toilet, you know what I mean? When you build a great car, when you teach someone a language, when, you know, whatever it is, any task, when you fix a shoe, you know, it's just, if you put love and care into it, you know, it's just a thing that we're tapping into, you know, and it's not ours.
And anything that can be done with intention and done beautifully and done carefully and, you know, with love. Well, thank you for choosing to pull out of the atmosphere and out of the universe what you do, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Likewise.
There he was, my friends, Michael League. I'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.